handouts for us? Yeah, we got it. So so this class is a little bit different, right? Because in the other classes, people were doing theology, but they weren't actually doing theology. Theology was happening, but they weren't calling it theology, right? They were just doing their stuff, right? It was either Bible commentary, or it was explanation of things, or it was, thoughtfulness, but it wasn't, I'm going to now sit down and explain my theory of God, right? It wasn't, theology, God stuff, right? And now we're into an era of the moderns, and the moderns actually thought about theology, because, there was departments of theology at the university, so they'd heard of the concept, and maybe we'll think about this, right? So I want to just go over a couple of the people who are big names in Jewish theology modern, God and modern thought. We're not going to study all of them because we don't have time, right? But a little summary here. So, big name, Mordechai Kaplan. Mordechai Kaplan, he is born in Lithuania. He comes as a teenager to the United States of America. He becomes a student at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and he never leaves. Okay, he's a student there, then he's a staff there, and he's there forever. And he drives them all nuts, so they push him over to the Teachers Institute, where he's in charge of education and producing teachers for the Jewish schools, right? And he has this great theory. He says Judaism is not a religion, it's a civilization. Any civilization has a language, and a people, and a land, and culture, and religious stuff. But it's more than that, right?
Wait a minute, is this the guy who founded Reconstructionism?
Yes.
Okay.
Reconstructionism was founded based upon him. He's the patron saint of Reconstructionism, but he was never a Reconstructionist.
Oh.
He was,
okay.
Like the school, the Reconstructionist college starts up, he never taught there. It was just important there, right? He worked at JTS, right?
Okay, that's where I got confused.
And there's a lot of Reconstructionist thought going through JTS, right? And the rabbis that graduated from JTS, especially from that period. And his notion was, I reject the idea of a personal God. God doesn't have a personality. That's just too wacky. But there is something out there, sort of a pantheistic type thing, that if you take everything, there's something holy there. And it moves us towards salvation. So we'll look a little bit about Cantor. Okay. Then there's Richard Rubenstein, who I actually knew. He was in town where I was, and he was getting in trouble with the Moonies. But his notion is, how do you approach God after the Holocaust? Right? The Holocaust is as big a problem for the Jewish people as the Crusades were in that era. The response to the Crusades was Yisker. Right? Yisker and martyrdom was a response to the Crusades. What's the response to the Holocaust? Is there religion after the Holocaust? Right? To quote a famous debate between Elie Wiesel and the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I don't think they were talking to each other directly, but I think their words are in conversation. This is before Elie Wiesel found God again. After the Holocaust, how can you believe in God? Elie Wiesel. And the Rabbi was, after the Holocaust, how can't you believe in God? Right? So the Holocaust is a challenge to our thought. Right? Harold Kushner and Harold Schulweis, they come up with a modern version of God. They've got, the problem they have is God and evil, right? That age-old problem. If God is good, and God is powerful, and God is knowing, how can evil exist? Because if evil exists, then either God isn't powerful enough to do something about it, or God didn't know about it, or God doesn't care, right? And so, especially Kushner moves God to this notion of God is the person who is mourning with us about all the terrible things that are happening. God is our support when things are happening, right? Sort of rehabilitate God as being good, even though God's the creator of everything and terrible things are in this world, right? Martin Buber, famous for I and thou, or he says there's I-it relationships, that's transactional, and there's I-thou, the relationships I have with a person. And you need to treat God as if God is a personality in your life, as a something, right? Not just an object, but someone that you're engaging with, okay? These are all ideas, okay? Levinas is responsibility for each other. God is the source of moral duty, right? What do we owe each other, as the modern philosophers might say, right? Understand the world as this is an intricate place where we all have obligations to each other. And then there's Heschel. Heschel also taught at JTS, and he taught at the same time as Kaplan, and it would be interesting, right? Because the student would go to the class with Kaplan, and he'd say, God is the power that makes for salvation. And then you'd go to Heschel's class, and he'd say, Da lifnei mi ata omed. Da, no. Lifnei, in front of me, whom, ata, you, omed, or standing. And you understood that. It's like, oh,
Pretty close.
yeah. Da lifnei mi ata omed, right? Know before whom. Know before whom. Not what. Not before what you stand, whom you stand, right? And his is the notion that faith is a leap. There has to be a leap of action as well as a leap of faith. And he's the one who said, in Selma, what is he doing? He's praying with his feet as he's walking across with Dr. King, right? So these are some of the great philosophers of recent times. And then there's Elliot Dorff, because I have to include Elliot Dorff, because he's written a lot of stuff. God is the partner with Israel. It's a funny thing. Elliot is he wrote a book called Knowing God, and they put a little card saying in Dorff's book Knowing G-D, and he has this huge thing about you don't use G-D because that's not God's name. God is not God's name. God is an English word. God's name is a yud and a hey and a vav and a hey. And outside that, we're just, and he called this whole G-D or Hashem, H-Shem even, which is like, he called this Neo-Uber Frumkeit. It's the new extreme, I'm being very frum, right? So he was amused. We were amused that his book was described that way. Marcia Falk. It's like God is feminine. Hello, we've had this male image of God, but God doesn't have gonads. And how do we imagine God as the feminine, right? None of these ideas were present in anything up so far, right? So let's look at what some of these greats have to say, and let's start with Kaplan, okay? And it's paragraphy, so why don't we just go around and read the paragraphs, and we're going to start with Milton and then move to his left.
Okay, the idea of creativity has functioned in Jewish life as an antidote to the pessimism which experience with the evils of life tends to engender. We are so accustomed to think of God as the creator of the world that it is hard for us to associate the idea of godhood with any being not conceived and endowed with superlative powers of creation. It is nevertheless a fact that in primitive religion, and even in the more developed religions of polytheism, a notion of godhood was seldom associated with the power to create. The psychological origin of the belief in God as a creator is undoubtedly wish fulfillment of man's desire to transform his environment when he realized his own impotence to do so.
Okay. We think that God creates the universe. What's God been doing since? Right?
No.
Right? Like, we don't think in terms of daily encounters with God. But other religions do. And Tevye the Drayman in Fiddler on the Roof does. I mean, he talks to God all the time, right? So Kaplan's saying, we're pushing onto God our frustration that we can't create things. So we want God to create things. God is the thing that creates, and we're the people that wish we could create. But he's worried that we're not connecting with God on a personal level. At least that's how I'm reading this paragraph.
The Sabbath is regarded in Jewish tradition as celebrating the creation of the world. The modern equivalent of that interpretation of the day would be the use of it as a means of accentuating the fact that we must reckon with creation and self-renewal as a continuous process. The liturgy speaks of God as renewing daily the works of creation. By becoming aware of that fact, we might gear our own lives to this creative urge in the universe and discover within ourselves unsuspected powers of the Spirit.
Okay, what's he trying to say?
We can create too.
Yeah, it's ongoing. It's ongoing creation, right? It's not something that just happened, there's a rock and I'm done. I have to maintain that rock. And maybe we need to maintain things as well. Okay? Yeah, I know. Well, I just read an article that there's on this really remote island that takes like 3 days by boat to get to, where there's like turtles that are extinct elsewhere and fish that are found nowhere else. They found plastic rocks. Like plastic is forming into rocks. And it's like, wow, human waste is making it to this island in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, it's the Anthropocene era. Yeah. Okay. Dan?
The belief in God as creator, or its more modern equivalent, the conception of the creative urge as the element of godhood is the world, is needed to fortify the yearning of spiritual self-regeneration. There can hardly be any more important function for religion than to keep alive this yearning for self-renewal and to press it into the service of human progress. In doing that, religion will combat the recurrent pessimism to which we yield whenever we misjudge the character of evil in the world. It will teach us to live without illusion and without despair upon the future, with clear recognition of the reality of evil and creative faith in the possibility of the good.
Okay, what's he trying to do here? We had this notion of God as creator, and that's kind of, you don't have a connection with that. And then the Sabbath brings in this notion of continuous creation, right? And then here he's kind of subverting it, and he's saying, well, in the same way that God needs to continuously create, we need to continuously create, right? Live without illusion, without despair for the future, clear recognition of the reality of evil and creative faith in the possibility that we can self-renew. So it's talking about a self-renewing God. Okay.
But he's mentioned pessimism at least twice.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's trying to combat the pessimism
Right,
by using creativity.
right,
And
right.
what if you're not a creative person?
Well, so,
is it a personal creativity? You know,
well,
praying. You know,
creativity as in actually doing something. Like, remember how we had with, was it Sadia or one of them had talked, you have the first mover moves and then does nothing, and then everything else is a chain reaction. But the mover does nothing ever again, right? And he's saying, no, The mover is still moving, right? So don't think of God as this monolithic wall. Think of it as something permeable that you can interact with, right? You can have, and that you yourself, if you're made in God's image, you know, it's not what you did when you were a kid and then, you know, that's the rest of your life, you just continue breathing until you die. No, you need to actually engage with the world and do things and have hope for the future, right? Okay, Bob.
Religion should indicate to us some way whereby we can transform the evils of the world if they are within our control and transcend them. If they are beyond our control, transcend them if they are beyond our control. If we give heed to the creative impulse within us, which beats in rhythm with the creative impulses of the cosmos, we can always find some way of making our adjustment to evil productive and good.
Okay.
Sounds very utopian to me.
Oh, well, it's, you know, this is the, I don't know if it's the Irish Wayfarer's Prayer. You know, God grant me the strength to change the things I can change and the serenity to accept the things that I can't, right?
And the wisdom to know the difference.
And the wisdom to know the difference, yes. So, I mean, that's what he's saying, right? It's like, you know, to transform the evils of the world if we can,
Mhm.
and transcend them if we can't.
How do you transcend evil?
You come to terms with it. I accept that evil exists and there's nothing I can do about it, so I'm going to concentrate on those areas of my life where I can do things, right?
Okay, so it's very
But what if the
pragmatic.
evils is inflicted on you as a person? Can you transcend that? I don't know, that's
Okay,
difficult.
so I was watching a TV show and there's this guy and he's in a prison cell. And he's going to be in the prison cell for the rest of his life. And it's like, you know, once I stopped being angry about that, it was bearable.
But if
Okay,
he
that's
committed
the
the crime,
example.
if he committed the crime,
No crime.
no crime.
No crime, no, just
Oh.
wrong person, wrong place, wrong time.
Oh, I'd be better too.
But it's like, it's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
So this is a philosophy for a good life. But is God necessary for any of this to happen?
It's all internal, it's your internal attitude, but they're.
It's a thought construct. You know, so he's got a way of living life, but God is also optional to that way of living life, right? It's God is the source of inspiration. Inspires us.
So you're not interacting, you're.
I'm not sure that we're interacting,
Okay,
because I'm not sure there's anything to interact with.
okay,
Because God doesn't have a personality. God is just, you know, this natural force that inspires us. That's my read of it. Maybe it's an unkind reading of it, I'm not sure. But as a Zen philosophy, this works pretty well. I mean, there's a whole synagogue that way, which is founded on those principles, and they seem to be doing very lovely. Right? They're building a new outdoor sanctuary so that they can pray with nature. Okay.
Pray for nature.
Well, yeah. Any so that's Catholic. Okay. Okay. Are you persuaded by Kaplan's view of God? Interesting question here.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't seem like he has a view of God, he has a view of man.
Yeah. Well, Kaplan is not a supernaturalist. So,
With all of these, I didn't,
yeah.
none of them seem to have a view of God, they have a view
Yeah.
of how man might interact with God or shouldn't or whatever.
Well, that's what makes them modern, right? You know, I mean, the traditional view is God commands and you obey. Okay, you have an obligation to obey God, and you have look. I'm reading a midrash right now, right? Adam had 6 obligations. Don't murder, don't steal, don't do sexually impermissible things, don't curse God, set up courts of justice to deal with all the other things, and one other that I can never quite remember, but it's pretty, oh, don't eat the limb of an animal while it's still alive, okay? Those are the 6 things, right? Those are Adam's mitzvot, right? And then, no, I'm sorry. Adam's was, that wasn't it. It was one other thing. Then Noah is, and the Sabbath, right? Then Noah is added, okay, you also have to, can't eat animals while they're still alive, the living animal, right? And then Abraham got Milah, and Isaac got Milah on the 8th day, and Jacob got don't eat the Gid HaNaseh, the sciatic nerve, right? And then all the rest of us got all the rest of the mitzvot at Mount Sinai, which is like how wonderful all the rest of us are, right? Yeah. So, but this notion of obligation, there's a modern philosopher, which I need to read. If you ever watch The Good Place, it's like one of the favorite philosophers there is human beings owe obligations to each other, right? So in Judaism, God is the reason why we owe obligations to each other. In this fellow's philosophy, it's because that's just how it has to be. Okay, let's look at Buber, okay? Ellie.
As experience, the world belongs to the primary word, I it. The primary word, I thou, establishes the concept of relationship.
Okay, keep going.
The spheres in which the world of relation arises are 3. First, our life with nature. There the relation sways in gloom beneath the level of speech. Creatures live and move over and against us. They cannot come to us, and when we address them as thou, our words cling to the threshold of speech.
Right, when you talk to the animals, they don't really understand. Okay, yeah, Fido might understand a little bit, but he doesn't really understand. I mean, he does feel love, and it sort of is an object, but also you don't mind, I mean, you feel bad about it, but you still put Fido down, And if Fido is a horse and it breaks his leg, then you put him down, even though, you could have splinted it and done a whole bunch of things, but it's just too expensive, so, okay. Yep, they keep going.
Second, our life with man. There the relation is open and in the form of speech. We can give and accept the thou.
Right, you can get to know someone, right? You can have opinions, they can have opinions, you can form a relationship. And the relationship could get better, the relationship could get worse, you can fall into friendship, fall out of friendship, but there's possibility, you can really see the other.
Okay, third, our life with spiritual beings. There the relation is clouded, and it discloses itself. It does not use speech, yet begets it. We perceive no thou, but nonetheless we feel we are addressed, and we answer. Forming, thinking, acting. We speak the primary word with our being, though we cannot utter thou with our lips.
Okay, the spirituality, okay? I can't see myself in animals, right? I mean, I can see, yeah, we have bodily functions, but I don't know that dogs feel obligation, right? Human beings I can relate to, right? But the spirituality, how do you relate to that? You can't really see yourself and, what is it like to be God? I mean, that breaks the mind. But you feel that we have to address God in something more than an it. There has to be someone that we're talking to. Okay? Let's read one more paragraph.
The thou meets me through grace. It is not found by seeking, but by speaking of the primary word to it is an act of my being, is indeed the act of my being.
Okay. So I'm speaking to the thou, and God is, and I feel God's presence, or I experience God's grace, okay? But I have to speak the word. I have to seek out the thou. Okay, no?
Where are we?
The relation? Yeah.
The relation to the thou is direct. No system of ideas, no foreknowledge, and no fancy intervene between the I and the thou. Desire itself is transformed as it plunges out of its dream into the appearance. Every means is an obstacle. Only when every means has collapsed does the meeting come about.
So you kind of just have to, do you remember Robert Heinlein?
Yeah.
Stranger in a Strange Land.
Oh, waiting is until you grok in fullness?
Right, yeah, waiting is until you grok in fullness, there we go.
Read that a
Excellent.
long time ago.
So this notion of grokking, this verb, grok, is just to experience, understand, just become one with the universe. Right? Fully understand something without understanding anything. Okay? Well, you keep going.
What's this meeting that he talks about?
Meeting with God,
Oh.
encountering God.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I think the second, the one he calls the second, our life with men.
Yeah.
That's the most practical, most concrete thing that I
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
And, and there's a lot of the Talmud is based on man's relationship to men. How do
That's
we-
right,
how do
that's
we,
right, that's
if we
right.
injure somebody else's animal, what do we have to do to recover?
But he's not doing anthropology, he's doing theology, right? Anthropos, man, anthropology, that's right.
Mhm.
But he's doing theology, he wants to encounter God.
Right.
Darn it,
Okay.
okay? Every particular
Yeah.
thou.
Me?
Yeah, sure.
Every particular thou is a glimpse through to the eternal thou. By means of every particular thou, the primary word addresses the eternal thou. Through the mediation of the thou of all beings, fulfillment of relations and non-relations comes to them. The inborn thou is realized in each relation and consummated in none.
Okay. So I'm just gonna spin this, because what does that mean? You're thou, and you're thou, and you're thou, and you're thou, and you're thou. And every time I encounter another thou, I have a taste of encountering the thou, right? The eternal thou, right? Because each of you is in the image of God, and each of you is a spark of the divine. And so when I encounter another and see them as a thou, I have the memory of a taste of the experience of the prime thou, which is
So
God.
if you're having a relationship with your fellow human beings, there's an it level, and then there's a higher level that's a godlier level
Yeah.
where you're maybe experiencing, like you said, a taste of
Yeah,
godliness
Right.
with each person, but it seems to be how you relate to them, because
Right.
it seems to be one option and
And
thou
that-
seems to be
when you
another.
relate to another person as a thou, right? So this is similar to the notion in the Talmud that I think we may have talked about. When two people study Torah together, God's presence hovers between them. Did we talk about that? Yeah, right. So that's what this is. That's kind of his spin on it, right? When you encounter another human being and you have a thou moment, or even I guess with your dog, when you're really encountering your dog and you feel that sort of something more. Like, oh my God, this is a moment in time and I'm connecting with a human being and this is like my whole universe, right? Well, okay, that's the whole universe. That's a taste of the thou. Okay. Last paragraph.
Men do not find God if they stay in the world. They do not find him if they leave the world. He who goes out with his whole being to meet his thou and carries to it all being that is in the world finds him who cannot be sought. So you can never find him, right?
You can never find, but you can be in an eternal state of seeking.
Yeah.
Right? Which is actually really nice, because if you found God, then you'd stop looking. And the looking is the journey, and the journey is what's important, right? Anyone do not crossword puzzles or jigsaw puzzles
Crossword puzzles.
or Lego or anything like that, right?
Crossword.
Yeah, okay. Before you start, you haven't started. And after you've finished, you don't spend hours looking at the crossword that you've done. It's over, it's done, next, right? But while you're in the process of doing the task, it's like you're in the process and it's such a great feeling, right?
You're in the zone.
You're in that zone. That's why I think American television shows are so terrible, but so wonderful, because they never end, right? You know, he's never going to find the one-armed man. And the police are never gonna catch him, okay? He'll never resolve. And we'll just watch season after season after season in this moment of joy of the fugitive, right? I can't use that reference with people younger, but I love this. I love that I can do this, okay? We just, Kevin and I, there's this show called Poker Face. It's new, it's on Peacock. We saw the opening episode, and I said, okay, we can't watch the rest of the show because, you know, she has burned her bridges. He's gonna be chasing her forever. There's no way that she can make him stop chasing him without killing him or her dying. So the show is never gonna resolve itself, and I don't have the commitment, I don't care enough about the character to watch them dangle on the string week after week after week after week after week, okay? So, but with God, we can be in that moment of dangling, always getting a taste of God every time we encounter God in another person, or in another animal, or even in nature. Sure, why not? You know.
But that's never ending also, right?
But that's okay.
That's okay.
It's okay, because that's spirituality. I mean, you never achieve oneness with the universe. When you achieve oneness with the universe, you die, okay? When you achieve perfection, you die, right? Because you're done, right?
So it's about the journey.
It's about the journey. It's the never-ending project, right? So, you know, so if you're gonna do a jigsaw puzzle, you're gonna do the 10,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, because you want to stretch it out.
So one of the questions is, how would Buber describe God? I don't.
God is the eternal thou.
Okay.
It's the ultimate other that we encounter.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Heschel. Let's bring in some spirituality. Now, Heschel should have been the next Apter Rebbe, the Rebbe of Apt. So the Apter Hasidim were the Hasidim, the follow the Rabbi of Apt, and Abraham Joshua Heschel is, you know, should have been a Rebbe, but instead he went to university and also rabbinical school and also learned all the stuff, but he still has that Hasidut flowing through his veins. And he sees the world, he's a modern Hasid. And he collected people like a modern Hasidic rabbi did. Okay. Heschelians. Let's hear about Heschel.
Okay. But how can we ever reach an understanding of him who is beyond the mystery? How do we go from intimations of the divine to a sense of the realness of God?
It's almost like he's talking to Buber here, right? Where do you go from there? Okay, keep going.
The roots of ultimate insight are found not on the level of discursive thinking, but on the level of wonder and radical amazement, in the depth of awe, in the sensitivity to the mystery, in our awareness of the ineffable. It is the level on which the great things happen to the soul, where the unique insights of art, religion, and philosophy come into being.
Okay, radical amazement. Radical amazement, right? My go-to for radical amazement is the eyeball. Okay. I know how the theory of evolution works, and I like the theory of evolution. It really explains a lot. It explains how, you know, giraffes get longer necks and hyenas don't. Okay? And it explains a lot of things. I can see how successive genetic variations either find a niche and then crowd out the others, or they don't, okay? But I don't know how you get from an amoeba to an eyeball. Because an eyeball is a thing that works really well. It's got a focusing lens, it's got muscles to focus the lens, it's got a retina, it's got cones to interpret the information. That's a lot of complex stuff there. And I don't see how you can degrade any of those things and have something that's at all useful at all, right? I don't think you start out with a non-focusing eye and then some people, evolved for better eyes. I don't see that happening. It's like somebody has to, this could not have happened by accident or by chance or by random mutation. There's no way you get from, a lump on your face to an eyeball. I can't see it.
Yeah, but the primitive eye started, that animal that had the primitive eye could only distinguish between light and dark. And
Right.
then it became more sophisticated. And
Right,
the
right,
animals
right.
that had more sophisticated eyes won over the ones that couldn't see so well.
I understand, but it seems to me that a lot of the stages along the way weren't really that useful. And that also only makes sense as if it's evolving towards an eye. But the theory of evolution is you're not evolving towards anything. You're just evolving randomly. So anyways, eyes freak me out. They are my area of, whoa, I can't buy that happening by chance. Somebody designed this thing. Okay, somebody designed this thing somewhere, right?
It's not sufficient to say that somebody designed the amoeba and then eventually developed
I
eyes and
think
things like
I
that.
think
It's
the
not
eye
enough.
was programmed in, and DNA is like, that is a immensely complex thing. That's like DNA is computer programming, right? This is just, and the level of it, and like you can switch genes on and off, and like, oh look, you wanna have wings? Switch this one on, right? We've genes in ourselves, we've all this junk DNA, which does stuff, we just don't know what it is.
Right, it
Anyways.
used to do stuff.
Anyways.
It doesn't do it
Anyway,
anymore.
I don't wanna debate eyeballs, but that's my area of, that's my go-to for random, for radical amazement. Freaks me out, right? That and flower petals, right? It's like, come on.
I mean,
Okay.
it's not that there's life, before there was no life, and then there was life because of chemical
It's-
interactions and all.
Oh yeah,
That
all of
doesn't-
that too, but if you want me to point to something specifically that breaks my credibility for random evolution, it's the eyeball. Okay, radical experience. Okay, keep going.
Okay. It is not from experience, but from our inability to experience what is given to our mind, that certainty of the realness of God is derived. Our certainty is the result of wonder and radical amazement, of awe before the mystery and meaning of the totality of life beyond our rational discerning. Faith is the response to the mystery, shot through with meaning, the response to a challenge which no one can forever ignore. The heaven is a challenge. When you lift up your eyes on high, you are faced with the question. Faith is an active man who, transcending himself, responds to him who transcends the world.
Right.
Well, now there's an interaction here.
Right, there is an interaction, right? My certainty that eyeballs cannot be explained rationally is my inability to experience, to understand an eyeball as just something that can exist by and of itself, is my entry point to, my response to the mystery, to that mystery is some kind of faith. Okay, I'm not sure how strong that faith is, but there are moments of, I can't explain this. If I can't explain this, God is a relatively simple solution to a complex problem. And maybe I'm willing to go there, right? So I'm transcending myself to transcend the world. It's like, I'm just gonna take it on faith. Something's behind this. Something bigger than me. Okay, Diane?
God is the great mystery, but our faith in him conveys more understanding of him than either reason or perception is able to grasp. This indeed is the greatness of man, to have faith. For faith is an act of freedom, of independence, of our own limited faculties, whether of reason or sense perception. It is an act of spiritual ecstasy, of rising above our own wisdom.
Right. Faith is really interesting because you can't prove it. You can't prove faith. If you want to have a good example of the, there's a word for it, the sort of impossibility and the just bad idea of trying to prove faith. Read Milton Friedman's As a Driven Leaf.
He's an economist.
Not Milton Friedman, Milton Steinberg. There we go. Milton Steinberg's As a Driven Leaf. I knew I was close. Because he's got his character, Elisha Ben Abulia, who is trying to prove faith. He wants to have faith that is unshakable, that's landed in proof, and he goes through his whole life and he's unable to do it because faith doesn't work that way. Faith is this leap of, right? And now the problem is when you get certain in your faith, then things get a little dicey. I think there has to be some uncertainty in your faith, right? Especially when you start trying to push your faith on other people. I mean, that's really an abuse of faith. But in terms of your own personal perception, it's the next paragraph.
But before you go on,
Yeah.
how do we acquire faith? Is it just in the nature of human beings to have faith?
I think we gain faith through radical amazement, right? If, Sherlock Holmes said, Arthur Conan Doyle, once you eliminate all other possibilities,
Right.
whatever's left, no matter how improbable,
Yeah.
must be the truth. Faith is when you eliminate all of the possibilities, but the thing is still true, okay, then you gotta just take it on faith.
Right.
Because nothing's left. Nothing's left. Don't ask me why anymore, but I believe that Johnny can do it. I really do. I have faith.
Right.
There's nothing that proves he can do it, but I just have this feeling, right? Come on, Johnny. You can run the marathon. Go for it. Okay? Certainty.
The certainty of the realness of God does not come about as a corollary of logical premises, as a leap from the realm to logic, to the realm of ontology, from an assumption to a fact. It is, on the contrary, a transition from an immediate apprehension to a thought, from a preconceptual awareness to a definite assurance, from being overwhelmed by the presence of God to an awareness of his existence. What we attempt to do in the act of reflection is to raise that preconceptual awareness to the level of understanding.
Right. Right. It's you can't reason your way to God, right? All you philosophers, thank you very much. You've done a great service to humanity, but you can't do it. You have to start with an apprehension that something's not right, and that something not right leads you, to a train of thought. I admit that, but it's not rooted in a certainty. It's rooted in a mystery. And the solution is, maybe there's.
But what's this understanding? I thought we couldn't understand. With faith, you take things on faith.
So it's
You
a
gotta
level,
understand.
okay, so I'm gonna parse words, it's a level of understanding. You can get close to
A
understanding,
level of understanding.
okay, you know?
Not
right.
understanding.
Like, you know, I understand how a combustion engine works. I can't build one. But I have a basic understanding of the mechanics here, okay? I know somebody else out there created it much better than me, right? And I can tell I can tell if it won't work, right? I know why it's not working. I know how it should work. I have a level of understanding. I don't have full and complete understanding. I'm not an engineer for Ferrari, although that's maybe not the best choice, given their history with engines. However, they got much better. They were, Schumacher drove for Ferrari. He was the greatest driver in the world. And he didn't win many races because he was in the worst cars. Then when he drove for a team that knew how to make an engine, oh my God, he was like the world champion every single year. Okay,
So he's saying you have to want to believe in order to believe.
Yeah.
It's,
gotta put some effort into it.
yeah. So let's say that you want to believe and you have radical amazement and you believe.
Yeah.
You believe in a Jewish God as opposed to a Christian God, or do you just?
So there's nothing actually Jewish about any of the people that we've read so far. Very good, 100 points, right? These are great. These are great theologies, but they're not necessarily Jewish theologies. They're just theologies put forward by Jews. 100%. 100% right.
Is that the quiz? Do I?
We've been inflating a bubble, and you just took a needle to it. And it just went bang! Okay, but it doesn't change the fact that it was a lovely bubble. It just wasn't necessarily a Jewish bubble. Well, I guess we can all go home now.
So we're saying then that all these people are looking at things from a general lens, or I guess
It's
we're
all-
questioning if they're looking at it from a Jewish lens,
It's-
or what's Jewish
Okay, so
about
it's
it.
all Jewish compatible,
Yeah.
and it's all Jewish rooted because, you know, the only way I can find to explain Buber is to quote a little bit of Talmud at you, right? So, let's come back to that. Okay? So let's finish off our dear friend Heschel.
In other words, our belief in the reality of God is not a case of first possessing an idea and then postulating the onto counterpart of it. Our belief in his reality is not a leap over a missing link, but rather a regaining, giving up a view rather than adding one, going beyond self-consciousness and questioning the self and all its cognitive preconceptions. It's an ontological presupposition.
Right. It's only when I'm unable to explain something
Oh,
that I need to, right? I'm giving up my belief that I can explain the universe.
so when you give it up, then you have faith
Then
about the universe.
or despair, mind you. You could have despair. That's entirely possible, right? But faith is because there's the proof of the universe, right? It's like what they used to say about bumblebees. They were wrong, but bumblebees should not be able to fly. The physics doesn't work. They're wrong, because they fly, okay? But you just can't figure out the physics. That's what it means, right? It's not that you know there's magic in bumblebees. It means that with all of your great science, you can't crack the bumblebee nut, right? There's something you're missing, and maybe you need to go quantum or I don't know, right? Okay. God in search of man, man in search of God, God and man searching for each other. Okay? Okay. How do human beings relate to Heschel's God, by the way, right? Well, what's our interaction with God? Is any required? I mean, does this put any obligations on us?
As Jews, we're supposed to pray.
But Heschel's argument, okay, he's proven God, or he's proven his faith in God, he's inspired us to faith in God, now what? What do we have to do about it? I don't know, it's unclear, as Elaine has pointed out, like, what's particularly Jewish about this? Okay, Marcia Falk is gonna bring us into the feminism. Okay,
So we should have a woman read this paragraph?
well,
It just
it
happens
just
to fall
happens to be
on
her turn.
turn.
One of the more heated debates that have arisen in response to my creation of alternatives to the traditional blessings alternatives to the traditional blessing form concerns the fact that my blessings do not directly address God in the second person. The question of whether Jewish prayer needs to address God as you is a highly charged one, perhaps even more provocative than the feminist challenge to the gendered God. Vigorous protests arise when one questions the exclusive authority of the I-thou address of divinity. There is a widely held assumption that this is the only legitimate mode for Jewish prayer.
Okay, so real experience that I had, I wrote an article and I talked about it. What does it want from us, right? And I received a scathing letter of critique, intellectual critique, saying, you can't call God an it. God is a thou,
Right.
right? It is objects and thou are, and thou is, right, personality. And I'm saying, no. It is a pronoun and thou is a pronoun. And I can talk to it. Because, if you're talking to, I don't know. Okay, that's not a good, if you're talking to a robot, right? Do you talk to you? Okay, you say you, okay, that's thou. But when I describe the robot, it's an it. How are you doing today? At the HAL 9000 from 2001 A Space Odyssey, okay? Came out in 1969, so good time of reference. How are you doing today? Yeah, that's still a thou. But when I'm describing what the computer said, I don't say what is Hal, I don't say what's he thinking. I say what's it thinking, and that's okay, right? But people get very territorial because we've read Buber, and so we know that it is a bad word. But we need a gender neutral term for thou, right?
Thou is gender neutral. Thou is already, doesn't imply gender, thou.
True. That's true. But it implies personhood. And I don't think God's a person. Okay? Anyways, and also the problem is thou might not be gendered, but she's having to come up with prayers in Hebrew. And your choices are, Arlene, what are they?
Male and female.
Right, it's either ata or at, right? It's gendered. So she has that problem. English is one of the only languages that doesn't mess around with gender, and it doesn't mess around with gender because it was Scandinavians trying to learn English as a second language, and they thought that the gender thing was stupid. So they just didn't do it. The same way that, in Spanish class, you can talk Spanish without gendering everything. It's wrong, but they'll understand you and say, you learned your Spanish in high school. Okay. Okay. So English is the only language that doesn't have this problem. Okay. So she doesn't want to Baruch at, because now I'm saying God's a female, so the solution is male. So she Baruch Yah, Baruch, Yah, God, right? Okay. You want to get for more paragraphs in? Okay.
Or I could argue.
Okay, argue. Yeah.
So so let's say that you have to make a change in that book. Should you change the theology or should you just change? The problem is in the language.
Right,
Let's invent
right.
some new words.
So that's what she does.
Yeah.
And she's
Okay.
taking flack about it.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Falk is saying, you guys are so pissed off because I won't use you. in my alternative, okay? Because I don't want to gender God either way, 'cause I'm a feminist.
I'm seen as a non-gender, I think a reference got at the presence.
Yeah, the presence.
So I don't know what she uses, but that's something I've come across.
So, I've got Falk's book on my shelf, I have to take a look at it.
There's a lot of work being done right now with pronouns.
Yeah,
and-
I know.
But what happens in Hebrew? What are they doing?
So,
I digress, I'm sorry.
no, it's fine. I was learning with someone who was, it wasn't Marcia Falk, but it was someone like her. And, very much into, Baruch, Brucha at, blessed are you, feminine, right? And then, once you get into Hebrew and start learning, and the table is male, and the floor is female, the walls are, once everything starts getting gendered all over the place, you kind of stop paying attention to gender and it doesn't bother you, right? So, 85 women and 2 men in a group, they have no trouble being referred to by the masculine, because the masculine is inclusive of the feminine, and the masculine does not necessarily indicate masculinity, it indicates male or female or unknown. And that's just the way the language brain works. So it's hard to, modern Hebrew's only been around for 100 years, 150 years maybe, but it's hard to create a third gender, because what would that look like, right?
But we're kind of seeing that right now, as people are trying to invent words
Right.
and pronouns.
Right, but in English it's easier, because in English, the case endings of the nouns that go with the pronoun and the case endings of the verbs that go with the pronoun, we don't have any case endings, so we don't have to worry about it matching, right? Whereas everything is, nothing and im, or a and ot. What are you gonna pick? Which syllable are you gonna use? Which vowel are you gonna use? Are you gonna use o? No, that doesn't possess a. The vowels are all spoken for, right? Everything has a meaning already. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's a lot easier in English.
Yeah, but I guess my problem is language is supposed to be kind of living. It's
Yeah.
language evolves.
Yeah.
So it can't be just to,
So
come up with some verb forms
it's
that
true.
specifically address God.
It's true that language evolves. Language usually evolves by a population of people speaking another language that crashes into it and inserts their grammar into it, right? So, English looks the way it is because it was beside Cornwall and Wales and got attacked by the Vikings, and by the way, the Normans came in and gave us not a lot of grammar, but a whole lot of vocabulary, right? Okay. Mike, you want to read this paragraph? Okay.
While I would agree that relationship is an important element of theology, I do not see why it is necessary to envision God as a transcendent other in order to affirm relationship. This view certainly fails to account for the deep sense of connectedness I personally feel when I am in touch with my participation in the greater whole of creation. Moreover, the conception of God as transcendent other is based on a hierarchical construct of God, in a world that can be highly problematic for modeling relationships, especially from a feminist perspective, since it provides the theological underpinning for the hierarchical dualisms, including the foundational dualistic contrast of male and female, that characterize and plague Western culture. It hardly seems coincidental that when the relationship between God and world is depicted in the traditional, in sexual terms, God is envisioned as male, and the world, often represented by the human community of the people of Israel, is depicted as female.
Okay. Worried about power relationships. Okay. So it just wants to break out of this natural dualisms. Okay. Yeah.
I would say that I do not believe an anthropomorphic view of the divine is necessary for the foundations of a moral life. Instead, I would suggest that we bring human relations directly into our liturgy by explicitly affirming in that liturgy our interpersonal values, and by using prayer as an occasion to make commitments to live according to those values.
Right. Let's just leave God at it. Okay.
So let's just pray to ourselves. I mean,
No, let's express our wonder, but you know,
Let's not give it a gender.
let's not gender it, let's not, you know.
Okay.
Sort of. Yeah, let's remove this part. How do we relate to false God?
She's still trying to make a connection. She's
Right,
saying,
right.
you know, she feels God, she feels something, there's a
Right.
connection being made. This gender thing, whether male or female is.
So I want, you're right, it's like, okay, I like Kaplan's force of the universe, and I like Buber's personal encounter, and I might even I have no problem with Heschel's radical wonder. I just want to stop using historically coded language to express it. Because you can't talk about male and female without having a hierarchy of power, right?
Okay, so she's saying she wants to express this without
Right.
this power
Right.
concept
Right.
behind it.
Right.
She just wants to express what is meaningful and what she has a relationship.
Yeah.
She's clearly
Right.
saying that
Right.
there's a relationship there.
It's like this computer. This cord has a male coupling and it has a female receptacle. And it's the cord that makes all the difference. She's just, the receptacles, the receivers are just waiting passively for some male thingy to insert itself and take action, right? So it's the same way that, you know, we don't want to have the master bedroom anymore, we have the owner's bedroom. You know, it's like, cause it's coded language, just we need to talk somewhere differently where it's neutral. You need to grok it, okay? You know, so. Okay. So let's hear from Rabbi Dorf. Rabbi Elliot Dorf. Elliot Dorf is on the last page here. So
Me?
sure, why not?
My root experience is that God means one thing to me in moments of thought and another in moments of prayer and action. When thinking about God, God signifies, among other things, the superhuman and maybe supernatural powers of the universe, the moral thrust in human beings, the sense of beauty in life, and the ultimate context of experience. In contrast, when I experience God in prayer or action, the God I encounter is a unique personality who interacts with the world, most especially in commanding everyone to obey the laws of morality and the people Israel to observe the mitzvah. It is the one unique God who cannot be reached by generalization.
Okay.
It says he's commanding everyone to obey the laws of morality?
Yeah.
That's not true. I mean,
What else?
in our
That's
experiences.
that's what mitzvah is. Mitzvah is the laws of morality. It commands, we're commanded. This
It's
one at
not
least is
successful.
Jewish. No, it may not be successful, but it's still commanded. We don't always follow the mitzvot, right?
Right.
So here, Helene, here's your Jewish aspect of it, okay? Bringing it together, right? So he's not a dualist, but the God I think about is very much Heschel's Kaplan's God. But the God I talk to is Buber's and Folks, right? And when I'm talking to God, there's a relationship between us, and the relationship is, oh my goodness, you command, I obey. We love each other, right? And I can understand, so when I'm thinking about God, God is, ready for our big words, God is transcendent, untouchable. God is the king. And when I talk to God, God is immanent, meaning present, and I'm talking to the Father. And of course, we have a precedent for this way of thinking about God in Avinu Malkeinu, right? Our Father, our King, right? And those words are lighting up in Carlene's brain because we've been working on our possessive endings, right? Okay. So that's how he pulls it all together, right? And a little bit of the obligation thing, which nobody else talked about, really. Okay. Let me continue with Dorf, it's fun.
We learn most about other people and we foster relationships with them through doing things together and through talking with them. Observation and cogitation have limited value in such contexts. Since God in the Jewish tradition is both personal and unique, human experience would suggest that we use common action and verbal communication in seeking knowledge about God.
Okay? I'm gonna just rewrite that and say, you know, when I encounter things that are made in God's image, I'm encountering God in that way, and you know, you relate to people the way that you relate to people. Okay? Helene disagrees with that reading of it.
No.
No? Okay,
I'm
okay.
just listening.
Okay, so I'm not sure how to read that. Okay. Keep going, Diane.
Revelation adds to our knowledge of God by framing and informing our present experience with God through the insights and experiences of our ancestors. Neither the original revelation nor its traditional interpretations nor the continuing testing of that tradition with our own experience is alone sufficient. The key to using revelation as a source of knowledge of God is the interaction between the original revelation and its ongoing interpretation.
Okay, what's the original revelation he's talking about?
Simon?
Mount Sinai, right? Mama Har Sinai. And that's the original revelation. And what is the ongoing?
Talmud?
Talmud and Midrash and our discussions of it when two people sit together over Torah and debate. Okay? That informs our relationship with God. Okay? Just trying to weave everything together. Okay, I'm getting a new appreciation for him, I really am. Okay. Well,
The other side of learning about God through verbal communication is prayer. On a personal level, prayer is often difficult. On a philosophical level, it is complex. And yet, in both the personal and philosophical realms, it can be highly enriching.
okay, prayer, right? The rabbis of the Talmud said that prayer that when we pray, I'm thankful for modim because my head bows of its own accord. Right? So modim, or you're right, modim you're supposed to bow, and he's saying when I get to modim I'm falling asleep. That's what he's saying. Okay, it bows of its own accord. I'm thankful that there's a place to bow there because my head is already nodding off. And the other rabbi says, you know, I count the bricks in the wall, and another rabbi says, I ask myself the question, if the patriarch and the exilarch, two high-ranking people in the Jewish community and the non-Jewish community, both appeared at the door at the same time, you know, Archie Bunker style. Which one would give precedence to come in the ring? And another one says, you know, I count the birds, and you know, it's like. So prayer was boring back then too. It's not just now that we're kind of bored with these words. But sometimes it can be an enriching experience. Sometimes you actually feel like you're talking to something. And you're saying these words and you're meaning these words and you're feeling like you're part of the conversation. And the other person is just a really good listener. Because never talks back or gives any indication that they're listening at all. But you know, it's prayer is difficult, it's complex, but it can actually be a good feeling. You can feel, some people actually come away from prayer feeling good.
Is he talking about the prayer in a service?
Yeah,
That's what,
Sure.
not the prayer you would do at home, just in your own mind, that kind of prayer,
I think he's talking about, articulation. So I believe that for a prayer to be real, your lips have to move and some air has to go over your larynx and your vocal cords need to be doing something. Because otherwise God's a mind reader, and I don't want God to be a mind reader because my mind goes in places that are very un-God suitable and I don't want to be judged for that, right? So if God respects your privacy and if God is not a mind reader for all of the bad stuff, God can't read your mind when you're praying to God either. So you actually have to say, Baruch atah, or whisper things, right? So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shakol niya b'dvarav.
The
God
modine,
tastes watery today.
you said modine
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
That's part of the amoeba.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we pray to.
yeah.
What does modine stand for?
We're thankful.
Well, that's all.
Yeah.
Services we're thankful.
Yeah, I know, but at that specific point, you're supposed to go, Modim anachnu lach, you're supposed to bow there,
Right.
right? So,
And there are two versions of modine. One
that's true, and you
say-
bow at both, because they're both happening at the same time,
Right.
right? Okay. So, fine, you just finish off the thing for us.
Both the abstract God of the intellect and the personal God of action, revelation, and prayer are legitimate and complementary conceptions of God, and we need both to be true to the totality of our experience as human beings and Jews.
Right, you have to understand God both ways. Avinu and Malkenu, transcendent, immanent, and the God of Buber, and the God of Heschel, and the God of Kaplan, and even the God of Falk. Sure, why not? It's complex.
So we've got a lot of aspects here.
Got a lot of aspects, a lot of different ways to think about God. Okay. Well, I feel more theological now. This has been an uplifting experience. But it's an interesting thing that of all of them, only Rabbi Dorff pulls us back into actual Jewish world of mitzvot and obligation and commandment. That's the Jewish aspect of it, right? What we owe each other, all systems of philosophy grapple this question of where does obligation come from, right? So there's the social contract, we all agreed to be held to this contract. There's the veil of ignorance, if a system is such that we all would have agreed, then it's an okay system. There's God commanded and we obey. Or there's just, it's in the nature of human beings because if we don't owe obligations to each other, none of us can survive. And so we should all agree that owing obligations to each other is a better system, right? My right to life is meaningless unless you have an obligation not to kill me. Which is a difficult way to approach things if you're talking about the Second Amendment, because then the Second Amendment is impinging upon my right to life. And that's where we have, conflicts of obligations, right? I don't feel particularly obligated to let you have a gun. I just.
But the people who support the Second Amendment would say, if everyone had a gun, then we'd all be safer.
Yeah, I know, but see, what the Second Amendment says is that the government is obligated not to interfere with your ability to have a gun, because God knows, when the British come to suppress us again and we don't have a standing army, you'll need your arms to rise up.
Right.
And I know I'm interpreting that wrong, in as much as a well-armed, well-regulated militia is an important thing, people should have the right to bear arms. I understand. When they said that, that was just junk DNA in the sentence. It has no meaning, it has no purpose, it's just ignore it. It's not active, the gene has been turned off, and it's just the second part that matters. I'm being facetious, okay, clearly I have an opinion on this and it's not the one that's gonna win me any fans on the internet. So this is our class today, and we can stop recording and now that I've solved the Second Amendment for you. You know, but it's junk DNA, it really is, it's like, you know, just when they're talking about that, ignore it.
Well, there was a famous trial in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is